told you all that I would keep you updated on the Barbarian Turpin case, and new information came out today. The district attorney in the case, whose name is Mike Hestrin, he's the Riverside County District Attorney. He gave a press conference where he laid down the charges that will be filed, and also answered a bunch of questions. And what I did was I shortened it up. It was about 20 minutes long, so I made it about 10 minutes long, and I took out a lot of the information. Basically, dead air time and questions from the audience. I put his answers in there because it's pretty obvious what the question was just by listening to the answer. All right, so let's get started with this.
That this morning, the Riverside County District Attorney's Office filed criminal charges against David and Louise Turpin. You know that as the Paris child abuse case.
Now, I know it as the Barbarian case.
What I would like to do today is first tell you what we've charged and the potential consequences of those charges, and then tell you a little bit about the why we charged the case. This is an ongoing investigation. We are at the beginning, not the end. The charges that we have filed are the following. We have filed 12 counts of violation of Penal Code Section 206 against both David and Louise Turpin. That is torture. We filed 1 count of a violation of Penal Code Section 288B1 against David Turpin, which is lewd act on a child by force or fear or duress. We've filed 7 counts of violation of Penal Code Section 368B1, which is abuse of a dependent adult. We filed 6 counts of 273AA, which is child abuse or neglect. We have filed 12 counts of false imprisonment. The date range of these charges, they range from 2010 to the present. And the physical location, of course, is in Riverside County, alleged to have occurred in Murrieta and also Paris. If convicted of these charges, if convicted of all of these charges as currently filed, these defendants are facing up to 94 years to life in prison. Our request that bail be set at $13 million per defendant. These individuals, first what I want to
I was kind of hoping the death penalty could have been in there. These people aren't people that should be alive on the planet. There's people that have murdered somebody with more kindness, and they were put to death.
tell you is these individuals sleep all day and are up all night. All 13 of the victims, including the defendants, typically go to sleep around 4 or 5 in the morning, sleep all day, and then be up all through the night.
I'd come home at anywhere from 12:30 to 3 in the morning.
This is a clip from a neighbor who saw them from an ABC article or a video, and he says he would see them walking around upstairs at night. Okay, and I think he said they were marching, and this totally corroborates that information.
Is the kids marching between those 2 rooms up there?
And how long would they march back and forth for in single file?
Hours.
Hours.
Yeah.
Mike Clifford lives across the street from their former home. He says his wife described some of the children as robotic.
They talked very monotone and robotic, and they talked at the same time, saying the same thing.
Victims report that as a punishment, starting many years ago, they began to be tied up. First with ropes. One victim at one point was tied up and hog-tied. And then when that victim was able to escape the ropes, these defendants eventually began using chains and padlocks to chain up the victims to their beds. These, as I said, these were a form of punishment meted out on these children and these adults. These punishments would last for weeks or even months at a time. The evidence is that 3 victims were chained up at the time the police first knocked on the door at the home in Paris. The defendants were able to get 2 of the victims unchained before the police actually entered. An 11 and 14-year-old were unchained as the police stood at the door, while a 22-year-old remained chained to a bed when the police entered the home. Circumstantial evidence in the house suggests that the victims were often not released from their chains to go to the bathroom. The 17-year-old victim that escaped had been working on a plan with her siblings to escape this abuse for more than 2 years. She escaped through a window and took one of her siblings with her. That sibling eventually turned back, became frightened and turned back, and went back into the house. The neglect and abuse started when the family lived in the Fort Worth area of Texas, with the parents at one point living apart from most of the children and dropping off food from time to time. The defendants lived in Texas for 17 years. In 2010, they moved to Murrieta, California, and in 2014 moved to their current residence in Paris, California, both, of course, in Riverside County. The abuse and severe neglect intensified over time and intensified as they moved to California. All the victims were and are severely malnourished. Specifically, severe caloric malnutrition associated with muscle wasting. To give you an example, one of the children at age 12 is the weight of an average 7-year-old. The 29-year-old female victim weighs 82 pounds. Several of the victims have cognitive impairment and neuropathy, which is nerve damage as a result of this extreme and prolonged physical abuse. None of the victims were allowed to shower more than once a year. One of the reasons for these punishments of being chained up to a bed were that, and by the way,
I mean, can you imagine that? They weren't allowed to shower more than once a year, maybe twice. That's just insanity. Like, what would be the purpose of this? It almost seems like these people are willfully, I don't even know what you'd call it, just sort of like intentionally trying to inflict maximum torture on their own kids. I mean, what parents would ever do this? It's unbelievable.
The punishments included frequent beatings and even strangulation. One of the reasons for the punishments were if the children were found to wash their hands above the wrist area, they were accused of playing in the water, and they would be chained up.
So you're chained up. Imagine that you're washing your hands, but you just can't go above the wrist because God forbid you should clean any part of your body. I mean, what kind of sicko is this?
None of the victims have seen a doctor in more than 4 years. None of the victims have ever seen a dentist. The children were, when they were not chained up, locked in different rooms and fed very little on a schedule. They were not allowed to have toys, although there were many toys found in the house that were in their original package and had never been opened.
You see how sick that is? I mean, that is mental torture. Like, look at these toys. They probably had never even got to play with the toy their whole lives almost, you know. They're just sitting there just wanting something other than something other than nothing, you know, and they would just tease them with it. Hey, look at this toy here. They do the same thing with food. You'll hear that in a little bit. It's disgusting.
Supposedly homeschooled, the children lack a basic knowledge of life. Many of the children didn't know what a police officer was. The 17-year-old, when asked if there was medication or pills in the home, didn't know what medication or pills were. About the only thing the children were allowed to do in their rooms or chained up was to write in journals. We now have recovered those journals, hundreds of them, and we are combing through them for evidence. One other thing, One other thing, the parents would apparently buy food for themselves and not allow the children to eat it. They would buy food, including pies, apple pies, pumpkin pies, leave it on the counter, let the children look at it, but not eat the food.
Isn't that just horrific? Could you imagine? You're so hungry and you just want something to eat. You know, the basics of life, and the parents just toyed with their own children. I mean, it actually makes me sad listening to this.
That we're alleging that David Turpin touched one of the victims in a lewd way by using force or fear.
Are David and Louise the biological parents of the second of the
This is the question and answering section.
two-year-old?
I'd be speculating at this
Let me go back to that question, because this is something that I saw on, that I actually commented on, and I also saw other people comment on the same thing on YouTube.
touched one of the victims in a lewd way by using force or fear.
So right here, this next question, I actually kept the audio in so you could hear the question.
Are David and Louise the biological parents of the
Are David and Louise the biological parents?
second of the two-year-olds?
I'd be speculating at this point. We are looking into all of those things, and that's part of the ongoing nature of the investigation.
So they are looking into that. That's good.
As a prosecutor, there are cases that stick with you, that haunt you, and you know, sometimes in this business we're faced with looking at human depravity, and that's what we're looking at here. David Turpin did have a job. He was employed. They did have money coming in. They were able to buy things. They bought a lot of toys that they never opened. They bought other things. They bought food that they ate and that didn't share with their children. Yes, so at least one of the older victims attended classes. I don't know about full college experience, but attended classes. What we know so far is that Louise Turpin would accompany him, wait outside of the classroom for him. When he was finished with class, she would take him home.
Yeah, you would have hoped maybe that kid that went to college would have slipped a note. But, you know, if the parents found out about that, I mean, he would have been toast. You know, I bet you they chained every one of these kids at some point for weeks and weeks at a time. And just knowing that that's a possibility, that could happen again, would keep you from doing anything.
This is severe, emotional, physical abuse. There's no way around that. This is depraved conduct. Apparently the 2-year-old was getting enough to eat, so we're not going to charge
So are you guys liking this prosecutor? Because I am.
torture against the 2-year-old. The basis of our torture charge is not just one thing, but it's a combination of severe abuse over time. Yes, sir. They're relieved. I will say that. They're in good hands. They're being cared for. They're all in the hospital. Their well-being is being looked at. Their health is being looked at. They're in good hands. As far as where they're going to end up, I don't know. We are going to do everything we can to assist them through our Victim Services Division, and hopefully they'll be cared for throughout this process. I think they will be very significant. I think those journals are going to be strong evidence of what occurred in that home. Right now, we are charging 1 count of lewd act. This is an ongoing investigation. I will tell you this, that if our investigation uncovers more crime, we will charge more offenses.
I think there's going to be a lot more charges coming.
Not that I know of. I'm not to minimize it at all. The abuse was horrific and over time, but this is prolonged abuse. It did involve beatings and strangulation, so certainly there was violence in the home, but we're looking at kids being chained up to their beds. Yes, sir. The way I can answer that is to say the victimization appeared to intensify over time. So it was what started out as neglect became severe, pervasive, prolonged child abuse.
See, that's something I kind of mentioned in that last video. When I saw the wedding pictures, I wasn't sure if it was something that was more recent, and it sort of seems like it's ramped up over the last few years.
We believe they were born in hospitals.
Isn't that crazy? They actually were born in hospitals. I guess, if you take the mother, David and Louise, whatever the hell their names are, went to the hospital to give birth just to that one child, everything would seem normal, right? Because apparently they got to eat food and everything would probably seem normal to the doctors. So, of course, when she did give birth to children, it seemed normal to the hospital. You're not going to bring your starving children with you. Okay, so that's something they could look at as well. That's crazy.
In hospitals. Crimes like these happen behind closed doors, in dark rooms, and so, of course, people who commit these types of crimes have to hide their crimes, and I think that was part of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is going to get really bad. This is just early on without really having a lot of information. They have this much already. I have a feeling this is going to be one of the sort of most disturbing cases in U.S. history. Unless, of course, it's some wild charade and not even true. Like somebody posted on YouTube the other day. I mean, look at these monsters right here. Absolute barbarians. Okay. Anyways, I hope this video got you all caught up. It did me. It was when I was listening to it earlier, I just couldn't believe it. Well, I mean, I could believe it because this is kind of what I was picturing happening, but it's just amazing that there are human beings, if you can call them humans, that actually do this kind of thing. All right? Just look at them. Just look at those faces right there. Monsters. They'll probably be on IDTV at some point. Monsters Among Us will be the episode. I would say barbarians, but monsters sounds a little bit better. Anyhow, I'm depressed now, and I guess I'll leave you with that. Till next time, be well.